Okay. Is it bothering you, Olivia? Okay. If it's in your wheel, please, you can change your seat. There are plenty of seats. Alrighty, so we last were talking about supply and the law of supply, which states that as price increases, quantity supply increases. As price increases, quantity supply increases, vice versa, keeping other things constant. We said that this is price, this is quantity. At $1, maybe 2 people are willing to buy to sell the product. This is your supply curve. At $1, 2 people are willing to sell it. At $10, 5 people are willing to sell it. And as price increases, more and more quantity supply increases, and as price decreases, quantity supply can decrease. Now, reservation price for supply is your minimum willingness to sell. Minimum willingness to sell. So you're not going to want to sell a product unless you get a good price for it, right? So you're not going to want to sell a product unless you get a good price for it, unless whatever you value the product. So your reservation price has to be greater than how much you value the product. So your reservation price your reservation price or your minimum willingness to sell has to be, the price has to be greater than that. So price received has to be greater than that, right? Otherwise you won't sell it, it's not worth it to you. So you will only sell something if price received is greater than your minimum willingness to sell. Quantity supply increases or decreases based on changes in prices. Anytime there's a change in price, quantity supply can increase or decrease. Change in supply or an increase or decrease in supply means shifting of the entire curve. Shifting of the entire curve. So a point to keep in mind that whenever it says there is an increase in supply, supply is shifting outwards. And whenever it says decrease in supply, it's shifting inwards. Whenever it says quantity supply is increased, specific points on the supply have increased. It's not shifting. Okay? Very important point to keep in mind. as we go forward. So what are some of the shifters of supply? We're going to talk about them today. Shifters of supply. What are some things that are not constant? You know how in the law of supply it says it's an increasing flow, price as price increases, quantity supply will increase, other things constant. What are some scenarios where other things are not constant and the law of supply is not applied and the entire curve actually shifts? So those circumstances are, number one, weather. So let's say that you grow crops and there is a hurricane or something and it destroys your crops. What happens? Your supply will decrease. The entire curve, if there is a hurricane, supply decreases. And which way does it decrease? So this is your regular supply, quantity, price. Which way is it going to decrease? Supply. What's that?
Downwards.
This way? No. That's the wrong way. Supply, if supply was to move this way, then you're producing more quantity. It actually decreases upward, like to the left. That's a decrease in supply. So this was S0, the initial supply. This is decrease in supply. The curve shifted upward. What's a good way to remember this? Well, when supply decreases, at the same price, less quantity is produced. So at P1, before 100 was being produced, now at P1 for the same price, 50 is being produced. So supply decreases this way. So weather is one factor that can shift the supply curve. Change in season, natural disaster, hurricane, etc. I just did it. So you can also draw this. It will help you understand. Number two. What's number two reason? Number two is number of firms. Number of firms can shift the supply curve. An increase in number of firms can increase supply. That's a simple one, right? If more people are producing a product, supply will shift to the right. It will increase. Before there were 4 producers, now there are like 100, so the entire curve will shift to the right. So let me draw this one. So this was your initial supply, your price, your quantity, increase in number of firms, supply increases. It increases to the right. This is an increase in supply. What this is saying that at the same price level, more quantity is being supplied. At the same price level, more quantity is being supplied. So what's one company that everybody, like, there are so many, cell phones is one company that a lot of companies are making cell phones now. Because why? Every single person owns one. There's a high demand. It has, decent price. So more suppliers of cell phone companies. It's shifting, supply curve shifts to the right. Okay, number 3. Prices or costs of inputs. Inputs are things needed to make a product. So like to make this table, you need wood, right? You need some paint. So these are inputs. So if price of an input increases, the supply would decrease because it's more expensive to make that product now. If wood becomes really cheap and paint becomes really cheap and this desk becomes really cheap to make, more people are gonna make it. So if prices of input decreases, supply increases, shifts to the right. So example, an increase in price of input will decrease supply. So what is that going to look like? Well, your regular supply curve, this was your price, your quantity. Supply decreases which way? Up to the left, right? Up like this. It decreases this way. So this was initial supply, this is the new supply. At the same price level, before 100 units were being supplied, now 50 units are being supplied. Why? Because it's more expensive to produce this product now. Okay? So cost of inputs can increase or decrease supply curve. Make sense? Any questions here? Everybody understands this? That at the same price, you're supplying less now. Before, at the same price, you were supplying 100, now you're supplying 50. Price has not changed. Supply has decreased though. Okay? Price has not changed here, supply has decreased though. You're not taking notes.
No,
You're not going to do well like that. Okay, so what is number 4 reason that can shift the supply curve? Technology. Technology is the number 4th reason it can shift the supply curve. So it could be improvements in production, typically increases supply. So technology will typically increase supply. Because research and scientists are always trying to find ways to increase the supply by making efficient machineries, better factories, etc. What is number 5th reason? Taxes well, number 5th is actually expectations. Expectations can increase or decrease supply. Remember that expectation was also a reason to shift demand. Expectation is a shifter of both supply and demand. If sellers or suppliers know that prices will increase in future, they will decrease supply now. So if the producers or the sellers are told that, you know what you're selling today, tomorrow or in a few weeks, the price is gonna go skyrocket. What's the producer gonna do? It's gonna wait for a few weeks. It's not gonna supply the product because they wanna make more money. So they're gonna wait until the price actually goes up, and then they're gonna wanna sell it. So expectation is actually a shifter of both supply and demand. Expectations are a shifter of both supply and demand. If we know that a certain neighborhood or certain real estate is going to go up in price, demand for